A single thread of silk could reveal your entire life in feudal Japan. Your social rank, your wealth, even your deepest hopes were woven directly into the fabric you wore every single day. This was a world where clothing was a strict, unbreakable code, not a matter of personal choice. We are going to unravel that code together, walking through the streets of ancient Japan from the age of the samurai to the bustling Edo period. By the end, you will be able to look at any historical image and read the hidden messages in its folds, colors, and stitches. We will discover why a noblewoman might wear 12 agonizing layers in summer, and how a wealthy merchant secretly flaunted a fortune in silk that the law forbade him to show. What does the way you dress say about the world you live in? This code was enforced with absolute seriousness. For a samurai, wearing the wrong shade of purple could mean confiscation of property. For a merchant's wife, stitching a single, illegal gold thread into her obi sash could bring public humiliation and a hefty fine. These were not suggestions, they were the architecture of society made visible. Every person you passed in the street was a walking document. The coarse, undyed hemp of a farmer spoke of a life bound to the earth, its practical, short sleeves allowing for work in the rice paddies. You would never mistake him for a samurai, whose wide, flowing trousers, called hakama, and stiff-shouldered jackets announced a readiness for both ceremony and combat. Even within the warrior class, subtle differences in the cut of a jacket or the pattern of a family crest, the man, could tell you if you were bowing to a low-ranking foot soldier or a powerful daimyo lord. But the most fascinating tensions appeared in the merchant class. By law, they were at the bottom of the official social order, below the peasants who worked the land. Yet, through trade, they often amassed fortunes that dwarfed those of the samurai who ruled them. Their clothing became a secret battleground. They might wear a modest, dark kimono on the outside, as the law demanded, but line it with the most exquisite, prohibitively expensive silk imaginable. A flash of brilliant color as they walked, a whisper of luxury known only to them and the keenest observer. Their wealth was an open secret, hidden in plain sight within the very folds of their legally compliant attire. So how did this rigid system begin, and who were the architects of this sartorial prison? This secret language of silk and hemp began with a whisper, not a shout. Beneath every brilliant kimono and every stiff-shouldered jacket was a foundation of absolute simplicity. The first thing a person of any class would put on each morning was the hadajuban, a plain, white underrobe. Think of it as a second skin, sewn from humble, breathable linen or cotton. Its purpose was intensely practical, to absorb the body's moisture and protect the expensive outer layers from wear and tear. Over this went the juban, another under kimono, slightly more finished but still simple in its rectangular construction. These were the blank canvases, the essential padding that created the smooth, structured shape so prized in Japanese dress. Without these hidden layers, the elegant drape of a kimono would collapse, the shoulders would sag, and the entire aesthetic ideal would fail. So the entire magnificent, coded display of feudal fashion was built upon a foundation of pure, unadorned function. It was a reminder that even the most opulent symbols of status relied on something basic and universal, a shared human need for comfort and preservation. But if the foundation was simple, what came next was anything but. The choices that followed, the selection of colors and fabrics, were where the true drama of social climbing and legal defiance began to unfold. The canvas for this entire social drama was a single, deceptively simple garment, the kimono. Its name literally means a thing to wear, but it was far more than that. It was a uniform, a status symbol, and a work of art, all built from a few fundamental principles. The basic shape was a T, formed from straight seams and rectangular panels of fabric. This geometric design was genius in its efficiency, minimizing waste when cutting precious cloth and allowing the same pattern to fit a wide variety of body types simply by how it was wrapped and tied. And that wrapping held a crucial rule. The left side of the kimono was always folded over the right side and secured with the obi sash. To wrap it right over left was reserved strictly for dressing the dead for burial, a mistake no living person would ever make. The wide sleeves, called kosode, were another key feature. Their size and shape varied dramatically by gender, age, and occasion, from the flowing furosode of an unmarried woman to the more restrained sleeve of a married one. But the true magic of the kimono lay in its blank slate nature. This simple T-shaped form was a neutral canvas waiting for a story to be painted upon it. Its very simplicity is what allowed for such immense variation. The same cut could be rendered in rough, undyed hemp for a farmer, in subdued, matte silk for a samurai's formal wear, or in breathtaking, embroidered brocade for a court lady. The obi sash itself evolved from a simple cord into a broad, stiff belt that became a central focus of decoration and a clear indicator of formality. So while the structure was fixed and taught from childhood, the choices of fabric, color, pattern, and the way the obi was tied shouted a person's identity to the world. This one garment, through its layers of meaning, could whisper of poverty or scream of hidden wealth, all while obeying the strict letter of the law. The obi sash transformed this simple canvas into a breathtaking declaration. It began centuries earlier as nothing more than a narrow cord, a purely functional tie to keep the kimono closed. But as the kimono's silhouette evolved, so did the obi, widening and stiffening into a central architectural element of the entire outfit. For men, it remained relatively understated, a structured band often in dark, subdued colors, tied in a simple knot at the back or front that emphasized practicality and restraint. For women, however, the obi became the masterpiece. By the Edo period, it was a broad, stiff sash, sometimes over a foot wide, that wrapped around the torso and was tied into an elaborate, sculptural knot at the back. This was not something a woman could tie herself. It required skilled assistance, turning the act of dressing into a ritual. The most famous and recognizable style is the teiko musubai, or drum knot, named for its resemblance to the traditional Japanese drum. This large, boxy knot was a symbol of maturity and formal elegance, often worn by married women. The way a woman tied her obi spoke volumes. A young, unmarried woman might wear a more flowing, decorative knot, signaling her youth and availability. The quality of the obi itself was a silent ledger of wealth and taste. A merchant's wife, legally forbidden from flaunting expensive outer silks, could pour a fortune into a single, breathtaking obi made of brocade woven with threads of silver and gold, its pattern telling a story from classical literature. The back of a woman, therefore, became her public face, a walking gallery of her family's status, her personal artistry, and her place in the social world. Every intricate fold and the choice of knot was a sentence in the unspoken language of feudal fashion. But this sartorial code extended all the way down to the ground, to what people wore on their feet. Footwear in feudal Japan was a clear map of occupation, status, and the very terrain of daily life. For the vast majority, for the farmer walking to the fields or the pilgrim traveling a dusty road, the standard was the waraji, a sandal woven from rice straw or hemp rope. These were the ultimate in practical, disposable footwear, durable enough for long journeys yet cheap enough to be replaced when they wore thin. They were secured with cords that laced up the ankle, a design that provided stability on uneven ground. A traveler might carry several spare pairs, knowing they were a necessity, not a luxury. Inside any footwear, if socks were worn at all, one would find the tabai. These were not like Western socks. They had a distinct separation between the big toe and the other toes, a design that accommodated the thong of a sandal. Made from cotton or leather, and often white for formal occasions, tabai were essential for comfort and hygiene, a small layer of civilization between the foot and the sole. For more formal or everyday wear within towns, people opted for zori. These were flat sandals with a woven straw, fabric, or leather sole and a V-shaped thong, the hanao, that passed between the big toe. They were a step up from waraji, more refined and suitable for indoor surfaces and paved streets. But the most iconic footwear of the era was undoubtedly the geta, the wooden clogs. Picture a simple wooden platform with two perpendicular wooden slats on the bottom, raising the foot several inches off the ground. Their practical genius was twofold. They kept the delicate, expensive hem of a kimono clean from mud and street debris, and they provided ventilation in humid weather. But even here, status spoke. The height of the getta's teeth could be a subtle indicator, with higher platforms sometimes suggesting a higher station, as they required a more careful, deliberate gait. The sound of geta on stone, that distinctive clopping rhythm, was the soundtrack of a feudal Japanese street, announcing each step with a wooden percussion that spoke of practical elegance. Yet for the warrior at the heart of this society, fashion was a matter of life and death. In the turbulent Kamakura and Muromachi periods, a samurai's clothing was not about quiet status symbols. It was a direct extension of his armor and his readiness for battle at any moment. His daily attire was built for one primary purpose: swift transition from courtier to combatant. The foundational layer for this was the hidetere, a matching set of a loose, wide-sleeved jacket and generous, pleated trousers. Think of it as the ultimate in practical warrior wear. The jacket was cut full and open, designed to be slipped on easily over other layers. The trousers, called hakama, were so wide they almost resembled a divided skirt, allowing for immense freedom of movement, whether mounting a horse, drawing a bow, or wielding a sword. This outfit was typically worn under the samurai's main armor, the yoroi. The hidetere's soft fabric prevented the heavy, lacquered plates of the armor from chafing the skin, while its loose fit accommodated the bulk of the protective gear without restricting the warrior's crucial mobility. You would often see the hidetere in dark, solid colors like deep blue or brown, colors that did not show dirt or blood readily, a grim but necessary practicality. For less formal occasions or for hunting, a samurai might wear the suiken, a type of hunting robe. This was a simpler, round-collared garment, often made of sturdy silk or linen, that could be easily tied at the waist. It was the functional outdoor wear of the military class, designed for activity and ease. But even on the battlefield, identity was paramount. That is where the mon, the family crest, came into play. These bold, graphic symbols were not subtle. They were emblazoned on the hidetere, often on the chest, back, and sleeves, in stark, contrasting colors. In the chaos of a melee, with faces hidden behind helmet masks, these crests were essential for recognition. They shouted allegiance across the fray, telling friend from foe in a single, sweeping glance. So while a merchant might hide his wealth in a lined kimono, a samurai displayed his very soul and lineage on his sleeve, his clothing a direct, unflinching declaration of function, family, and fatal consequence. But when the age of civil war ended, the samurai's wardrobe faced its greatest challenge. The Edo period brought 2.5 centuries of enforced peace, turning warriors into administrators. Their clothing had to evolve from battle-ready gear to the uniform of a ruling bureaucrat. This is where the kamishimo was born, a costume of pure power designed for the courtroom, not the cavalry. The ensemble consisted of 2 striking parts worn over the kimono. First, the kataginu, a stiff, sleeveless vest with dramatic, winged shoulders that extended out like a shelf. These shoulders were often heavily starched or even reinforced with paper or bamboo to hold their severe horizontal line. Then the matching hakama, those same wide, pleated trousers, now made of finer fabric and worn in a more formal, structured manner. The effect was one of artificial, imposing breadth. A daimyo lord clad in kamishimo did not look built for sprinting or swordplay. He looked built to fill a room, to project an unmovable, authoritative presence. The fabrics themselves whispered of a shifted priority, from the practical dark silks of the battlefield to exquisite, patterned silks like the luxurious Rinzu damask, often featuring the lord's family crest in a subtle, all-over pattern. Every aspect of the kamishimo forced a specific posture, the stiff shoulders pulling back, the long hakama requiring a slow, measured stride. This was the armor of politics, a visual declaration that the samurai's authority now came from his station at the shogun's court, his mastery of etiquette and administration, not merely from the sharpness of his blade. In a time of peace, the most dangerous weapon a lord could wield was his own imposing silhouette. Yet this political uniform had a far more visceral ancestor, the samurai's true second skin on the battlefield, the yoroi. This was not simply protective gear, it was a masterpiece of engineering and intimidation, a specialized form of dress that declared its wearer's purpose with every lacquered plate. The core was the do, the cuirass that protected the torso. Unlike the solid steel breastplates of European knights, the do was a marvel of flexibility, constructed from individual leather or iron scales, bound together with intricate silk or leather lacing. This lacing, often in a distinctive cross-knot pattern, was not just functional, it was a signature. The color and pattern of the lacing could denote a specific clan or general, creating a ripple of identity across the armor's surface. Over the shoulders draped the massive sode, the shoulder guards. These were not attached directly, but hung from cords, allowing them to swing and absorb the impact of a blade strike without transferring the full force to the warrior's body. For the arms, there were the coat armored sleeves that combined chainmail and small plates to protect the vulnerable forearm and wrist while leaving the hand free to grip a sword or bow. But the most personal and terrifying component was the helmet, the kabuto. Its bowl was formed from riveted iron plates, but its crown was a stage for artistic expression. Here, a samurai mounted his midate, a crest that could be a pair of sweeping metal horns, a fierce animal like a dragon, or a family symbol rendered in gleaming metal. This crest served a dual purpose. It was a beacon for his troops in the chaos of battle, and a psychological weapon meant to make him appear larger, more supernatural, and utterly fearsome to his enemies. Finally, completing the transformation from man to mythic warrior, was the mempo, the face mask. Often covering the lower half of the face, these were crafted into grotesque expressions, from snarling demons to serene old men, their surfaces textured to look like writhing muscles or bearded skin. The mempo protected the face, yes, but its true power was to erase humanity, to turn the warrior into an emotionless, otherworldly force. Every rattle of the laced plates, every glint from the helmet's crest, was part of a calculated performance of power, where the armor itself was both a shield and a weapon of terror. While the samurai's armor was a declaration of power, the clothing of the peasant was a testament to pure survival. For the farmer in the field, the fisherman on his boat, or the artisan at the loom, fashion was an impossible luxury. Every stitch, every fiber answered a single, relentless question: will this help me work? For women across the countryside, the iconic garment was the mop. These were not the elegant, flowing hakama of the samurai class, but something far more utilitarian. Picture baggy, durable trousers, gathered at the ankles and tied securely at the waist. They were designed for maximum mobility and protection, allowing a woman to kneel in the dirt, wade into a rice paddy, or carry heavy loads without the hindrance of a long kimono skirt. They were the uniform of female labor, often worn with a simple, short-sleeved kimono tied back out of the way. For men, the standard was the kosode, which literally means small sleeves. This was a shorter-sleeved, more practical version of the formal kimono, cut from the most humble fabrics available. The cloth of choice was almost always hemp or a rough, homespun cotton, fibers prized not for their beauty but for their incredible strength and breathability. These fabrics could withstand sun, rain, and the constant friction of hard labor. Color, when it existed, was equally practical. The most common dye was indigo, which not only produced a characteristic deep blue, but also had natural insect repelling and strengthening properties for the cloth. Many garments, however, were left completely undyed, showing the natural pale beige of hemp or the off-white of unbleached cotton. This was not an aesthetic choice, it was an economic one, saving every possible coin. In this world, clothing was not replaced, it was preserved. Garments were patched, repatched, and handed down until the fabric literally disintegrated. A network of careful stitches and mismatched fabric squares was not a sign of poverty, but a badge of honor, a map of a lifetime of labor and frugality. The peasant's wardrobe held no secrets, no hidden linings of luxury. It spoke with a brutal, honest clarity about a life lived in direct conversation with the earth. Yet in the quiet lanes of Edo's merchant quarters, a different kind of rebellion was being stitched into existence. The Chanen, the townspeople who built their fortunes through trade, lived a fascinating contradiction. By the official social hierarchy, they sat below the samurai and even the peasants, their wealth deemed less honorable than the fruit of the soil or the sword. Sumptuary laws were crafted to keep them in their place, forbidding the public display of lavish silks, certain brilliant dyes like purple, and overt golden embroidery. To wear such things openly was an act of defiance that could bring confiscation and shame. So the merchants mastered the art of quiet opulence, a language of luxury spoken in a whisper for those who knew how to listen. Their genius was in redirecting extravagance to the places the law overlooked. A merchant might step out in a perfectly respectable, dark blue or gray kimono, its outer surface a model of modest compliance. But the lining, the part that only flashed when he walked or moved his arm, could be a breathtaking panorama of hand-painted silk, depicting cranes in flight or autumn maple leaves in threads of crimson and gold. His wealth was literally on the inside, a secret joy and a subtle signal to other merchants, a shared wink against the system. The obi sash, that broad canvas on the back, became another legal loophole. While the outer fabric might be a permitted pattern, the stitching, the quality of the silk, and the complexity of the brocade weave could be of museum quality. A connoisseur running a finger over the surface would feel the difference, understanding that this subdued piece represented a year's income for a lesser family. Even the undergarments, the hidden juban, were crafted from the finest, most whisper-soft silks, a personal indulgence that no law could police. This created a fascinating social code, where true status was not broadcast to the street, but revealed in the intimacy of a home, in the careful fold of a sleeve, or in the knowledgeable glance of a peer. It was a game of exquisite subtlety, proving that sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you almost don't see at all. But this hidden language of wealth found its ultimate, breathtaking expression centuries earlier, in a world of pure poetry and agonizing beauty. High within the secluded walls of the Heian imperial court, around the year 1000, noblewomen lived a life of such extreme refinement that their clothing became a prison of exquisite symbolism. This was the age of the Junaito, the legendary 12-layer robe. The name is not an exaggeration. A court lady of the highest rank would be dressed by attendants in a precise sequence of silk kimono, one over another, until she carried the literal weight of her status on her shoulders. The full ensemble could weigh over 20 pounds, a magnificent, immobilizing cocoon. Each layer was a whisper-thin silk, chosen in colors that followed strict poetic conventions tied to the seasons, the occasion, and even the lady's own mood. The order of these colors was a fixed art form, with poetic names like crimson plum or wisteria purple, layered so that only a sliver of each hue peeked out at the collar and the cuffs. This created a cascading, graded effect known as kasein no irom, the layering of colors. The entire purpose was to conceal the woman's form completely, transforming her into a living, breathing piece of abstract art. With the body hidden, all aesthetic attention rushed to the only visible points, the layered bands of color at the neckline and the sweeping, waterfall-like sleeves that pooled around her. These became the canvas for her identity and intellect. A lady might adjust her collar just so, allowing a specific combination of crimson over pale green over violet to be seen, sending a silent, poetic message to an observer across the room. The sleeves, often several feet long, would be carefully arranged to display their patterns and the delicate lining within. In this rarefied world, where direct expression was considered crude, the Junaito was her primary language. A single, thoughtful color combination could reference a classical poem, convey subtle longing, or display her family's impeccable taste. It was fashion as high art and intense physical sacrifice, where beauty was measured in pounds of silk and the profound depth of a hidden hue. While noblewomen spoke through layered colors, the men of the Heian court declared their authority through an entirely different kind of uniform, one designed not for poetry, but for the absolute pinnacle of political ritual. This was the sokyutai, the most formal attire for male court nobles and the emperor himself. A costume so intricate and heavy it transformed walking into a slow, sacred procession. At its heart was the ho, an impossibly voluminous outer robe made of thick, stiff silk brocade. It did not hang from the shoulders in a natural drape. Instead, it was built out from the body with hidden frameworks, creating a massive, boxy silhouette that seemed to float around the wearer. This exaggerated bulk was the entire point. It made the man inside appear larger than life, a living monument rather than a mere person. From the back of the ho trailed the kayo, a long train that could extend several feet behind him. This train was not carried. It was arranged by attendants to flow across the floor, a visible, physical claim on the space, marking his path with a whisper of silk. Upon his head sat the kanmuri, a lacquered black court cap made of stiff, woven material, with a distinctive upright pennant at the back. Its most remarkable feature was a flat, projecting board that extended horizontally from the forehead, a design that forced the wearer to hold his head high and still. Any sudden movement would send the entire cap tumbling. In his hands, he held the shaku, a flat, ceremonial scepter made of aged wood. He never used it as a tool. It was a symbolic object to be gripped just so, its presence completing the portrait of a figure who ruled through ritual, not physical force. Every single element of this ensemble was a locked code. The color of the ho, the pattern of the brocade, even the length of the train, all were dictated precisely by the wearer's rank and the specific occasion. An emperor's robes would be a profound, deep yellow, a color forbidden to all others. A lower-ranking minister might wear shades of dark purple or green, each hue a clear rung on the ladder of power. Dressing in the sokidai was an operation requiring multiple attendants and over an hour of careful work. Once fully assembled, the nobleman could not move quickly or freely. His walk became a slow, gliding shuffle, each step measured and deliberate. This was not a limitation, it was the ultimate display of control. His authority was so absolute, his time so valuable, that his very movement was a ceremony. In the silent, polished halls of the palace, the rustle of the ho and the soft sweep of the kayo across the floor were the sounds of the state in motion, a world where power was worn, slowly and magnificently, on the sleeve. The rigid formality of the sokutai could not last forever, for fashion is a river, not a stone. A quiet revolution was already beginning beneath those magnificent layers, starting with the most humble of garments. The kosode, whose name simply means small sleeves, began its life hidden in plain sight. In the Heian court, it was the essential underrobe, the simple, white layer worn closest to the skin beneath the weighty junaito or the voluminous ho. Its purpose was purely functional, a barrier of modesty and comfort. No one would have considered it fashionable. It was a blank, a necessity. Yet within that simplicity lay its incredible potential. As political power shifted from the cloistered aristocracy to the military shogunates, and later to the bustling merchant class of the Edo period, the kosode began a slow, steady climb from the inside out. The extravagant, multi-layered styles of the court were impossibly impractical for the dynamic lives of warriors and townspeople. They required time, attendance, and a sedentary existence that the new society simply did not have. People needed to move, to work, to engage with the world more directly, so they began to wear their undergarments on the outside. The kosode, once hidden, became the foundational canvas for a new, more accessible aesthetic. Its rectangular cut, borrowed from the kimono, was versatile and required less fabric than the elaborate court robes. It could be made from anything, from the roughest hemp for a laborer to the most exquisite silk for a wealthy merchant's wife. This was a profound democratization of style. For the first time, the basic silhouette of daily wear was nearly identical across the social spectrum, the differences now expressed in the details of fabric, dye, and decoration rather than in the fundamental shape of the garment itself. The evolution of the kosode itself tells this story of change. In its early days as an undergarment, the collar was often plain and narrow. As it became outerwear, the collar widened and became a focal point, often lined with a contrasting color or pattern to frame the face beautifully. The sleeves, while still small compared to the flowing furosode of young women, began to vary in length and shape, subtly indicating age, marital status, and occasion. But the most dramatic transformation was in its surface. The plain white canvas became a field for artistic explosion. The Edo period saw an incredible flourishing of textile techniques, from intricate shibori tie-dye and delicate stencil work to lavish embroidery and pictorial yuzen dyeing, where entire landscapes could be painted onto the silk. A merchant could now wear a kosode decorated with a scene from a popular kabuki play or a pattern of lucky cranes, turning his body into a walking piece of contemporary art. This shift from the kosode as hidden layer to celebrated outer garment marks one of the most important transitions in Japanese clothing history. It moved fashion out of the rarefied air of the court and into the vibrant, creative streets of the cities, placing the power of personal expression, however bounded by sumptuary laws, into the hands of a much wider world. Behind every forbidden flash of color was a world of astonishing craftsmanship. The silks that lined a merchant's kimono and the vibrant patterns that danced across its surface were not just materials. They were the culmination of lifetimes of specialized skill. It began with the most delicate of threads. Sericulture, the raising of silkworms, was a precise and fragile art. Thousands of caterpillars would be carefully tended, feeding exclusively on fresh mulberry leaves until they spun themselves into cocoons of a single, continuous filament that could stretch for hundreds of meters. To harvest this thread without breaking it, the cocoons were gently steamed, then the end of the filament was found and painstakingly unwound, with several threads twisted together to create a yarn strong enough for the loom. The weaving itself was another realm of mastery. In places like Kyoto's Nishigen district, weavers practiced techniques known as Nishigen ori, creating brocades of breathtaking complexity. Using wooden looms that looked like intricate skeletons, they would weave patterns with threads of different colors, sometimes even incorporating gold or silver leaf wrapped around a silk core. The result was a fabric that told stories, with designs of pine trees, cranes, or flowing water emerging from the very weave of the cloth, durable and dazzling. But a blank expanse of silk was only the beginning. The true magic happened in the dyeing vats. One of the most revered methods was yuzen, a paste-resist technique that allowed for painterly freedom. An artisan would draw an elaborate design onto the silk with a special paste made from rice flour, essentially creating a dam that would prevent dye from coloring those protected areas. He would then carefully hand-paint dyes within the outline sections, layer by layer, to build up scenes of flowers, birds, or entire landscapes. Once the dye was set, the paste was washed away, leaving behind crisp, brilliantly colored patterns on a pristine white background. For more textured, organic patterns, there was shibori, the ancient art of tie-dye. But this was not the haphazard splattering we might think of today. Artisans would fold, stitch, pleat, or bind tiny sections of cloth with thread before dipping it into the dye vat. Each knot or stitch created a point where the dye could not penetrate, resulting in intricate, radiating patterns that were perfectly planned yet softly blurred, like frost on a window pane. The colors themselves were treasures pulled from the natural world. The deep, enduring blue came from the indigo plant, fermented in vats that smelled of earth and life. A vibrant, coveted red was extracted with immense effort from the tiny petals of the safflower, requiring thousands of flowers for just a few grams of dye. A sunny yellow came from the gardenia fruit. These natural dyes did more than just color cloth. They connected the wearer to the very seasons and landscape, each hue carrying the scent of the field and the patience of the harvest. To wear a kimono was to wear a tapestry of cultivated skill, from the silent worm to the steady hand of the weaver and the alchemist dyer, a symphony of art worn on the sleeve. The language of these textiles was written in symbols, a visual poetry where every crane and flower held a secret wish. A kimono's pattern was never merely decoration. It was a deliberate message, a charm, or a declaration woven into the very fabric of daily life. This symbolic vocabulary was drawn from nature, literature, and shared cultural beliefs, allowing a person to communicate hopes and values without uttering a single word. To wear a pattern was to carry its meaning with you, inviting its power into your world. The crane, with its graceful neck and majestic wingspan, was one of the most potent symbols. It was believed to live for 1,000 years, making it the ultimate emblem of longevity and good fortune. A kimono adorned with cranes, perhaps flying among stylized clouds or standing beside a pine tree, was a wearable prayer for a long, healthy life, often worn for celebrations like weddings or milestone birthdays. Flowing water, depicted as gentle, rhythmic lines or swirling eddies, spoke of purity, continuous flow, and resilience. Just as water could wear away stone, the pattern suggested the wearer's ability to overcome obstacles with persistent grace. Bamboo, which bends in the storm but does not break, was a beloved symbol of flexibility, integrity, and strength. For the samurai class, this resonated deeply, representing the ideal of resilience under pressure. Then there were the chrysanthemums, with their radiating petals. This flower was so closely associated with the imperial family that a 16-petal chrysanthemum crest became the exclusive emblem of the emperor himself. For anyone else, using this specific motif would be a profound transgression, but more stylized chrysanthemum patterns could still suggest nobility, elegance, and a connection to the refined aesthetics of the court. Beyond these specific symbols, the entire wardrobe was attuned to the turning of the earth. Seasonal patterns were a sacred duty, a way to harmonize your appearance with the natural world. Wearing cherry blossoms in the deep winter would have seemed as strange and discordant as wearing a wool coat in July. In spring, kimonos blossomed with cherry blossoms and wisteria, celebrating fleeting beauty and renewal. Summer brought designs of flowing streams, irises, and cooling morning glories, often on lighter, more airy fabrics. Autumn was announced by the brilliant red of maple leaves and the graceful shapes of chrysanthemums, while winter welcomed patterns of pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms, the so-called three friends of winter that represented perseverance through the cold. This deep, intuitive connection meant that a person walking down an Edo period street was not just dressed for the weather, but was a moving part of the landscape itself, their clothing a silent, respectful conversation with the season. This silent conversation extended all the way to the crown of the head. In feudal Japan, your hairstyle was not a matter of simple vanity. It was the final, crucial punctuation mark on the sentence of your identity, a public declaration of your age, your marital status, your profession, and your social class. For a samurai, the most iconic style was born from brutal practicality. The chanmage, that distinctive topknot, began as a battlefield necessity. A warrior would shave the hair on the front and crown of his head, leaving a patch at the back that was oiled, drawn up, and tied into a firm knot. This served a vital function. It kept hair out of his eyes during combat and, more importantly, ensured his helmet, the kabuto, would fit snugly and securely without shifting. In the peaceful Edo period, this warrior's practicality transformed into the ultimate badge of the samurai class. The shaved pate and oiled topknot became a legally enforced symbol of his status as a member of the ruling bureaucracy. Maintaining it was a daily ritual, a constant physical reminder of his place in the world. For the wealthy townsmen of Edo, however, hair became a playground for fashion. While they could not wear the samurai's chanmage, they developed their own elaborate, oiled styles. Men would grow their hair long, tie it back into a topknot, but leave the front and sides unshaven, creating a different silhouette entirely. They used generous amounts of fragrant pomade, often made from camellia oil, to sleek their hair into glossy, sculpted forms, sometimes even adorning their topknot with a decorative cord or hairpin. This was urban sophistication, a way to display personal style and wealth within the bounds of the social order. For women, the language of hair was even more intricate and revealing. A young, unmarried girl would typically wear her hair long, loose, and straight, a style called tergami. This flowing, unbound hair was a symbol of her youth, purity, and availability. Upon marriage, her hair would be bound up in one of the many complex styles known collectively as nihingami. These traditional updos were architectural wonders, built with the help of padding, combs, and a great deal of wax. The shape of the knot, its position on the head, and the way the hair was folded all conveyed specific information about her age, social standing, and even which region of Japan she was from. A married woman's up-do was a sign of her new responsibilities and her transition into the adult social world. Holding these elaborate creations in place were the kanzashi, ornamental hairpins that were both functional and deeply symbolic. Made from materials like lacquered wood, tortoiseshell, or precious metals, these pins could be simple and elegant or fantastically ornate, featuring seasonal flowers, dangling charms, or delicate metalwork. The type of kanzashi worn changed with the seasons: a sprig of plum blossom in winter, a cherry blossom in spring. They were not just decorations, they were protective amulets and expressions of personal taste, the final, glittering accent in a meticulously coded visual language that spoke from head to toe. A world this rigid in its dress code demanded a secret outlet for personal flair. Beyond the prescribed layers of silk and hemp, small, portable objects became the true windows into a person's soul and status. These were the accessories, the finishing touches that balanced strict function with a whisper of individuality. Perhaps the most elegant and communicative was the sensu, the folding fan. In a society where direct expression was often muted, the fan became a silent language all its own. Its practical use for cooling was almost secondary to its role in social dance. A gentle flutter could signal polite interest, while a sharp, decisive snap could end a conversation. A lady might hide her smile behind its painted ribs, or use its direction to subtly point toward something of interest without a word. The fan itself was a canvas, often decorated with seasonal scenes or poetry, reflecting the owner's taste and education. For men, particularly during the Edo period, a different kind of accessory marked the fashionable urbanite, the kaisuru. This was a slender metal pipe, often with a long, delicate stem in a small bowl, used for smoking finely shredded tobacco. It was less about the act of smoking and more about the statement. Carrying a beautifully crafted kaisuru, perhaps with intricate engraving or a lacquered finish, signaled that a man was modern, sophisticated, and part of the vibrant city culture. It was the Edo period equivalent of a sleek, designer accessory, often displayed prominently when not in use. But for true utility and artistry combined, nothing surpassed the inro and netsuke. The inro was a small, tiered container, a kind of miniature stack of boxes, held together by a cord. It was designed to be worn suspended from the obai sash, since traditional kimonos had no pockets. Inside, a person could carry seals, medicine, or other small personal items. The genius was in its closure, a system of cords and beads that kept the tiers securely locked. To prevent this precious case from slipping through the obai, it was anchored by a netsuke. This was a toggle, a small sculpted object carved from ivory, wood, or lacquer, with two holes through which the cord passed. The netsuke acted as a counterweight, hooking securely over the top of the obai. What began as pure function blossomed into a high art form. Netsuke carvers created tiny masterpieces depicting animals, mythical creatures, gods, or scenes from daily life with astonishing detail and humor. A wealthy merchant might own a collection, changing his netsuke to match his mood or the season, turning a practical fastener into a public display of connoisseurship. And for women, the decorative kanzashi hairpins we glimpsed earlier were far more than mere fasteners. Crafted from materials like tortoiseshell, lacquered wood, or shimmering silver, these pins secured the elaborate nihingami hairstyles. Their designs followed the seasons: a sprig of plum blossoms in winter, a cluster of cherry blossoms in spring. Some featured dangling chains with tiny bells or charms that made a soft, musical sound with every turn of the head. They were personal talismans, expressions of hope, and sometimes even concealed protective charms. Together, these small items formed a parallel language to the clothing itself. While the kimono announced your place in the world, your fan, your pipe, your netsuke, or your hairpin whispered about the person you were within that world. A delicate negotiation between the rules of society and the desires of the individual. Yet within this world of strict codes, The night held its own spectacular theater of dress. In the pleasure districts of Edo, two very different figures perfected the art of allure, each with a costume designed for a distinct performance. The geisha, whose name means person of art, was first and foremost a highly trained entertainer, skilled in music, dance, and conversation. Her attire reflected this refined purpose. She wore a kimono of elegant, but often slightly more subdued taste compared to the staggering spectacle of the oiran, the highest-ranking courtesans. A key distinction was in her obai. A mako, an apprentice geisha, wore a magnificent derari obai, a long, stiff sash that could extend nearly to the ground. It was tied in a dramatic, loose bow at the back, its luxurious fabric and exquisite patterning a testament to the establishment's wealth and her own budding artistry. As she danced, the ends of this obai would sweep and flow with her movements, adding a breathtaking visual element to her performance. A full-fledged geisha, however, wore her obai in a more compact, elegant knot, signaling her mature, sophisticated status. In stark contrast stood the oiran, the queens of the night. Their entire presentation was a deliberate, slow-moving spectacle meant to captivate and command exorbitant fees. Their most iconic feature was the incredible, towering hairstyle, built with their own hair, wax, and elaborate ornaments, adorned with multiple, dazzling kanzashi hairpins of tortoiseshell, lacquer, and silver. These hairstyles were named after natural wonders, like the butterfly or the great waterfall. But the true showstopper was the obai. Unlike any other woman in Japan, the oiran tied her magnificent, brocade obai in an enormous, elaborate knot at the front. This style, originating from an earlier period, was deliberately archaic and ostentatious. The knot itself was a complex work of art, and the ends of the obai trailed down her legs like silken banners. To complete this majestic, almost processional silhouette, she wore akobo, towering wooden platform sandals. These were not the practical gaita of a townswoman, but staggering platforms that forced her to walk with tiny, sliding steps, her arms held out slightly for balance. The entire effect, from the towering hair to the front-tied obai to the slow, precarious walk, was a performance of impossible glamour and unapproachable status. She did not walk to you, you came to her, drawn by a vision of splendor that moved at the pace of a dream. Even a child's first garments were woven into this intricate social fabric. From infancy, children in feudal Japan were dressed as miniature adults, their clothing a direct reflection of their family's station and their parents' deepest hopes. A baby born to a samurai family would be swaddled in fine, though practical, silks, while a farmer's infant wore simple cotton. This early mirroring was more than tradition. It was a child's first lesson in the world they were born to inhabit, teaching posture, movement, and social identity through the very cloth on their skin. One of the most widespread and tender customs was the practice of dressing young boys in girls' kimono. Up until around the age of 7, boys would wear the same colorful, patterned robes as their sisters. This was not a fashion choice, but a powerful protective charm. In an era of high childhood mortality, it was believed that malevolent spirits specifically targeted boys, the prized heirs of a family. By disguising a son as a daughter, parents hoped to confuse these spirits and allow the child to grow strong and healthy, safely hidden in plain sight. This visual deception was a parent's silent, desperate prayer stitched into every vibrant sleeve. The transition from this protected, gender-neutral childhood into the formal world of adult responsibility was marked by a beautiful ceremony, the Shichai Gosan Festival. Celebrated when children were 3, 5, and 7 years old, this rite of passage was a public announcement of a child's survival and growth. For a 5-year-old boy, the most significant moment was his first official donning of the hakama, the wide, pleated trousers of the samurai class. Before his family and at the local shrine, he would be carefully dressed in this adult garment. The act was profound. It signaled his formal entry into the social order as a future man, acknowledging his survival and welcoming him into the community of his ancestors. For toddlers just learning to walk and explore, practicality took a charming form, the harigeg. This was a kind of apron or coverall, often made of sturdy, brightly patterned fabric, that tied over the child's kimono. Its purpose was brilliantly simple: to protect the more expensive and delicate kimono beneath from the inevitable spills, dirt, and wear of playful childhood. Often decorated with bold, cheerful motifs like lucky turtles or brave heroes, the haragake was a parent's pragmatic love made visible, allowing a child the freedom to be a child without ruining the family's valuable clothing. And woven or sewn into the very seams of these tiny garments were the most intimate protections of all: small amulet bags. These pouches, no bigger than a coin, might contain a slip of paper with a protective prayer from a shrine, a tiny carved Buddha, or a special herb. They were secretly stitched into the lining of a kimono or tucked into the sash, resting close to the child's body as a constant, invisible shield against illness and misfortune. From the deceptive silk of a boy's robe to the sturdy haragake apron and the hidden amulet, every thread in a child's wardrobe was imbued with meaning, a blend of social instruction, spiritual hope, and a parent's fierce, loving care. Yet this coded world of dress was not a single, uniform map. The language of clothing changed its dialect as you traveled from city to village, from the ancient imperial capital to the bustling merchant metropolis. In Kyoto, the heart of the emperor's court for 1,000 years, style was defined by a deep, conservative elegance. Here, fashion whispered in the hushed tones of tradition, favoring subtle, layered colors, intricate woven patterns from the Nishigen district, and a refined adherence to the old ways. It was an aesthetic of restraint and pedigree, where the most valued kimono might be one passed down through generations, its beauty speaking of lineage and timeless taste. A Kyoto noblewoman's wardrobe was a library of classical poetry rendered in silk, each combination of colors a reference to the Heian masters, a quiet insistence that true sophistication never shouted. But travel east to the shogun's capital of Edo, and you entered a different universe of style. Edo was a city built by and for the chonin, the townspeople and merchants. Its aesthetic was not whispered, it was declared with a confident, cutting-edge flair known as Ikki. This was the philosophy of the stylish urbanite. Ikki was not about opulent display, but about a cool, understated chic, an appreciation for the subtle, the suggestive, and the perfectly timed. It valued muted, sophisticated color combinations like gray and brown, patterns inspired by everyday life rather than classical poetry, and a clean, uncluttered silhouette. An Edo merchant's wife might wear a kimono in a subdued stripe, but the quality of the indigo dye would be so profound it seemed to hold the night sky, and the precision of the stripe would be flawless. Her obi knot would be neat, modern, and slightly asymmetrical, suggesting a knowing departure from stiff formality. This was fashion as intellectual play, a way for the socially restricted merchant class to assert a new kind of cultural authority, one based on taste and trend-setting rather than inherited rank. Beyond these two great capitals, clothing adapted to the very soil and sea. In the snowy, rugged north of Tohoku, practicality dictated every stitch. Kimono sleeves were often shorter to avoid dragging in the snow or while working. Hems were reinforced with extra layers of fabric or even leather to withstand the wet and cold. The fabrics themselves were heavier, more densely woven hemp or cotton, and the predominant indigo dyes were not just fashionable, but valued for their added strength and warmth. In coastal fishing villages, you would see a similar story of adaptation. Fishermen and their families wore garments dyed with a particular, humble brown extracted from the bark of the arborvitae tree. This color was not chosen for beauty, but because it blended with the rocky shores and made the wearer less visible to fish in the water, a small advantage in a life defined by the sea's bounty. From the courtly whispers of Kyoto to the trendy streets of Edo and the hardy, weather-beaten clothes of the countryside, the feudal wardrobe was a living geography, its fabric literally shaped by the wind, the snow, and the rhythm of daily survival. Yet the rigid world of Japanese fashion was not an island, it was a coastline, and in the 16th century, a strange new tide washed ashore. Portuguese and Spanish traders, whom the Japanese called the Nanban, or Southern barbarians, arrived on their great black ships. They brought not only guns and Christianity, but an entirely alien way of dressing. For a brief, dazzling moment, the Japanese elite experimented with this exoticism. Daring samurai and wealthy merchants, always looking for an edge in status, began to incorporate Nanban items into their wardrobes. They adopted the tailored jacket, which the Portuguese called a jibao. In Japanese hands, it became the juban, a word we now know as the underkimono, but its origin hints at a much bolder past. Imagine a samurai, his silhouette already imposing in hakama and katajinu, slipping on a snug, European-style waistcoat beneath his robes. It was a hidden thrill, a secret nod to a wider world. Some even wore full Nanban trousers, a stark contrast to the flowing hakama, and draped short capes over their shoulders in a manner that would have been unthinkable a generation before. This was more than just novelty. It was a performance of cosmopolitan power, a way to signal that one was connected to the globe's most advanced technologies and distant kingdoms. But Japan has always been a master of assimilation, not mere imitation. These foreign shapes did not remain foreign for long. The most lasting impact can be seen on the battlefield. Samurai began to wear the jinbeori, a sleeveless surcoat donned over their armor. While similar garments existed before, the Nanban influence is clear in its more tailored, fitted cut, often made from luxurious imported fabrics like velvet or wool, and adorned with exotic patterns or even Christian crosses seized as trophies. This was not a Portuguese cloak, it was a Japanized symbol of military prestige. The foreign had been digested, stripped of its original context, and repurposed as a new element of native style. The Nanban fashion craze was intense but brief, snuffed out when the country sealed its borders in the 17th century. Yet its legacy lingered in the cut of a surcoat and the name of an underrobe, quiet fossils in the strata of Japanese dress, proving that even in isolation, the threads of the world had already been woven in. The calendar did not merely mark time, it dictated the very fabric of daily life. A person's kimono wardrobe was a living, breathing extension of the natural world, changing in form and feeling with each passing month. This was not a matter of simple comfort, but a profound act of harmony, a way to align the human body and spirit with the rhythm of the earth. The most fundamental shift was in the kimono's very construction, which transformed 3 times a year. During the humid, stifling heat of summer, people wore the hito, a kimono made from a single, unlined layer of airy fabric. Imagine the lightest, most breathable silk or rami, its cool touch against the skin, a small refuge from the sun. As the air turned crisp in autumn, the hito was carefully stored away. In its place came the oase, a lined kimono. This version had a full, separate lining of silk attached to the outer shell, creating a gentle barrier against the chill. It was the standard for both autumn and spring, those transitional seasons where warmth was needed but not yet the deep cold. Then, when winter's bite settled in, the wardrobe made its final, essential change to the watere, the padded kimono. This garment was quilted, with a layer of soft silk wadding stitched between the outer fabric and the lining. It was substantial, cozy, and often made from heavier, warmer silks, a wearable embrace against the frost. This biannual ritual of changing the entire wardrobe had a name, koramagi. It occurred on 2 fixed dates, the first day of the 4th month and the first day of the 10th month, officially marking the shift between summer and winter clothing. For a household, koramagi was a significant event. Storage chests were opened, precious hito or watere were carefully unpacked, and the previous season's garments were cleaned, aired, and meticulously folded away in camphor wood to protect them from insects. It was a collective reset, a deep cleaning of one's material life that mirrored the turning of the seasons, but the communication went far beyond just lining or padding. The patterns themselves spoke the language of the months. Wearing a kimono adorned with autumn maple leaves in the height of summer would have seemed as dissonant and awkward as singing a funeral dirge at a birthday party. The patterns were a silent agreement with nature. In spring, kimonos blossomed with cherry blossoms, wisteria, and budding willow branches. Summer brought designs of flowing streams, irises, cooling morning glories, and patterns that evoked flowing water or bamboo groves, suggesting shade and movement. Autumn was announced by the brilliant red of maple leaves, chrysanthemums, and grasses swaying in the wind. Winter welcomed the so-called three friends of winter: a pine, bamboo, and plum blossom, symbols of perseverance and hope amid the snow. Even the weight and texture of the fabric changed. Summer silks were gauzy and light, sometimes even sheer. Autumn and spring silks had a more substantial matte drape. Winter fabrics could be heavier, twill-weave silks that held their shape and warmth. The obi sash followed suit, with lighter, brocade obi for summer and thicker, more densely woven ones for winter. Every element, from the stitch of the lining to the bloom of the embroidered flower, was a conscious, respectful nod to the world outside the shoji screen. To dress each morning was to locate yourself not just in a social hierarchy, but in the very wheel of the year, your body wrapped in a poem dedicated to the season. The very fabric of a kimono began not on a loom, but on a shelf in the form of a tenmono. This was a single long bolt of cloth, and its dimensions were the unchangeable foundation of every garment. A standard tenmono for a woman's kimono was about 14 inches wide and a staggering 12 to 13 yards long. These narrow, rectangular parameters were not a limitation, but a puzzle to be solved with absolute efficiency. The entire art of kimono construction was a masterclass in zero-waste design. A skilled craftsperson would lay the long bolt out and, using a simple pattern of straight lines and right angles, cut the entire kimono from this one piece. The long, straight panels for the body, the shorter pieces for the sleeves, the collar, and all the small reinforcing strips, they all fit together like a perfect textile jigsaw puzzle, leaving behind only tiny scraps. This geometric cutting was a centuries-old principle of sustainability, born from the profound respect for the costly material and the labor that produced it. Once cut, the pieces were never discarded. They were carefully saved to be used for future repairs or to make smaller items, ensuring every thread served a purpose. With the pieces cut, the real magic of construction began entirely by hand. There were no sewing machines, only the steady rhythm of a needle and thread. The seams were sewn with a simple running stitch, but the genius lay in their impermanence. Nearly every seam in a kimono, except for a few small, reinforcing ones, was sewn with a loose basting stitch. This was a deliberate choice. It meant the entire garment could be easily taken apart. Imagine this: when a kimono became stained or worn at the cuffs and collar, it was not thrown away. Instead, it was carefully disassembled. The fabric panels were separated, turned inside out, and then reassembled with the still pristine inner side now facing outward. A single length of silk could be given multiple lives through this process, known as sei-gi, or recovering. It was a quiet, profound philosophy of preservation, where clothing was not disposable, but a renewable resource, its beauty maintained across generations through meticulous care and skilled hands. But a kimono, even a perfectly sewn one, was merely a beautiful shell until it was put on. The act of dressing was not a simple task. It was a precise and often collaborative art form. For a woman wearing formal attire, achieving the correct silhouette was impossible to do alone. The goal was a smooth, cylindrical shape, with no curves or bulges, a living sculpture. This required an assistant, often a family member or a professional dresser. The process began with the underrobes, the juban, which created the foundational layer. Then the main kimono was wrapped around the body. Here, a crucial trick was employed. To eliminate any hint of the body's natural shape, excess fabric was meticulously folded and tucked under the arms and around the waist, creating a series of hidden pleats and tucks that flattened the torso. The left side was always folded over the right, and the collar was pulled back to create a specific, flattering diagonal line at the neck called the irisugata. All of this was held in place temporarily with thin cords before the final piece, the obi, was applied. Securing this creation was the final, dramatic act. The obi sash, that broad, stiff belt, was not just tied, It was engineered. It was wrapped tightly around the waist multiple times, its tension critical for holding all the hidden folds in place. For a formal woman's style, the obi was then tied into an elaborate knot at the back, a process that required strength, dexterity, and an artistic eye. A dresser might use a small pillow or a stiff board inserted behind the obi to give the knot its perfect, sculpted shape. Every pull of the cord, every adjustment of a fold, was about creating an idealized form that transcended the individual body beneath. To wear a kimono correctly was to move within its constraints, to adopt a slower, more deliberate pace, and to carry oneself with the awareness of being a carefully composed work of art. The rustle of the silk, the weight of the layers, the constriction of the obi, all were constant reminders that beauty in this world was a disciplined and collaborative achievement. This intricate language of cloth and color was never meant to be forgotten. The feudal Japanese wardrobe, from the farmer's hemp to the emperor's sokutai, formed a complete visual grammar. Every thread spoke of social rank, every fold held a secret wish, and every color obeyed the silent turn of the seasons. It was a world where your identity was not just expressed by your clothing. It was literally woven into it, a walking document of your place in a meticulously ordered universe. The echoes of that system are still with us today. Modern kimono styles, though freed from sumptuary laws, still honor the symbolic patterns of crane and pine, the reverence for seasonal change, and the sculptural beauty of the obi's knot. High-fashion designers across the globe draw inspiration from the kimono's elegant T-shape and the dramatic silhouette of the samurai's hakama. The philosophy of wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and transience, influences everything from interior design to the way we appreciate a well-worn, cherished garment. This legacy reminds us that clothing is far more than fabric. It is culture, history, and art worn on the skin. So we turn the question to you. If you could step into any outfit from this fascinating world, which would it be? Would you choose the imposing armor of a samurai, ready for battle? The agonizing, poetic beauty of a 12-layer court robe? Or perhaps the clever, secretly lined kimono of a wealthy Edo merchant, flaunting the rules with a whisper? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed unraveling this sartorial code with us, be sure to subscribe. There are countless more historical mysteries waiting to be uncovered.